Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us today. So we're super happy to welcome you to this webinar, Efficient Certification Delivery, Streamlining Assessments for Greater Value and Credibility. So before we start, as I know, I can see a couple of people still joining, just a few housekeeping items. The webinar should last about 45 minutes, but depending on your question, we might be able to extend it, or otherwise we'll make sure to address them in the follow-up emails. Regarding the question, so you should see a chat on the side. Please keep the session interactive. We have a lot of questions, but I know the best questions are going to come from you. So just make sure you participate, and our team will make sure to actually forward that to us. If you're not able to attend the webinar until the end, don't you worry. The recording is going to be sent, I believe, tomorrow morning, probably earlier, but you should have that at least before the weekend. Another point is there might be a couple of resources mentioned during the panel. And again, we're going to make our best to incorporate them into the YouTube video description as well as a follow-up email so you can actually continue the reading. And finally, we're also going to be sending a survey post the webinar, part of the email that you're going to be receiving tomorrow. So just make sure it should be very short. So just make sure that you can fill it out. It's going to be a great help for us to improve for the next webinars. So before I turn it over to our panelists and introduce them and kick things off, maybe a little bit about me and the Constructor. So my name is Pierre Boudet, and I'm going to be the moderator today. I'm the Director of Business Development. And a couple of words about Constructor. Some of you may know, some of you may not be familiar with who we are. So we're an all-in-one learning software platform, and we have our own AI content studio, our own avatar technology. We also provide virtual labs for simulation-based training, an LMS, AI proctoring that's been on the market for about 10 years, all of that amongst other solutions. And we currently serve a variety of organizations, schools, higher education, government, corporation, certification organization around the world. So now, actually, to kick things off, it's actually my pleasure to introduce Nathan Thompson from Assessment System, who is one of Constructor's partner. So Nathan is the CEO and co-founder of Assessment System. Nate, super happy to have you around here. I think last time I saw you in person was in LA at the ATP. So great to see that we're continuing the conversation. And maybe for the people who don't really know about you, do you mind sharing a few words?
Sure. Thank you, Pierre. And thank you for the honor of inviting myself and Belinda to serve on this discussion panel. So as Pierre mentioned, I'm Nathan Thompson. I'm originally a psychometrician, and I'm CEO of Assessment Systems, and our focus is on helping organizations modernize their assessment process through stronger software for item banking, test delivery, as well as psychometric services such as doing job analysis or ANGOF studies. One thing we don't do is the proctoring aspect of it. And for that, like Pierre mentioned, we've integrated with their proctoring platform, which provides a really strong partnership for the end-to-end assessment process. Also, let my colleague Belinda Brunner introduce herself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Belinda Brunner. I am specialized primarily in test development. I have about 20 years of experience in test development. I've worked at 3 healthcare-related certification agencies in the US, and I also have international test development experience. I spent about 13 years in the UK and supported clients in the Middle East as well as in Europe and India and in some other places in the world as well. So I'm really happy to be here talking with Nate and with Pierre at this webinar as well.
Perfect. Thank you both. So what we could probably do to kick things off, and I think it might be interesting because, from what I've seen at ATP, a lot of people may actually be new to the field. So it might be interesting to maybe start with a 30,000-foot view of where the field is, and especially given your experience and international experience, Belinda, when you think about, a robust certification program and all the subcomponents that kind of go into it, the frameworks, the blueprints, handbooks, test development, delivery, security aspect, what is maybe standing out in terms of improvements in the field over the past 5 to 10 years? Where is the field today compared to maybe when you started or when you were actually gaining your knowledge? And maybe we could start with you, Belinda.
Sure. I think some of the biggest improvements that I see that have been made perhaps have been on some of the business side of certification, in some of the e-commerce aspects of registration, scheduling, payments, the ease of being able to do that, greater accessibility, remote proctoring, your world, Pierre. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that later. Digital badging, micro credentialing. I know we're also going to talk about some of that later as well. So the business side of things has certainly been made a lot easier. Unfortunately, the pandemic, I think, has also forced us to look at, ease of aspect of delivery, but also perhaps how we can make our processes smoother from a virtual aspect, so that we can bring subject matter experts and all those folks that we need to support development together virtually. I think we're still working on being able to do that in a more efficient way, but there are improvements being made in that aspect. And of course, AI and some of those things, we're just beginning to realize efficiencies there as well.
Yep, that makes sense. What about you, Nathan? What is actually standing out when you look at the field today compared to where it was 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, well, I would echo Belinda in saying that from a software and system perspective, the biggest change has been the increased acceptance in remote proctoring over the last 5 years. COVID definitely accelerated that. There has been some swing back to in-person testing, but so many organizations are sticking with remote proctoring because they found out that it's just as much security as in-person proctoring in some cases. Some cases it's even better, and it's far more convenient for their candidates. So I don't see that going away. I only see that expanding. On the operations and business side of certification, it's definitely the demographic cliff of what's happening these days with the demographics. There's fewer people going into university from a absolute perspective, and then there's the big change of, do you need to even go to university anymore? If you could just watch some YouTube videos, teach yourself how to do WordPress, and take a certification exam on WordPress, you're then qualified to work in WordPress. You don't need a 4-year degree in digital marketing or anything like that, right? So I see that as the biggest issue in the world of credentialing, but it's also the biggest opportunity, because those types of things are what the credentialing market needs to see. They just need to figure out how to act on it and adjust their certifications, maybe offer some new certifications or certificates. There's many things that they could do here.
Completely agree. And maybe to continue that question, maybe through the point of view of psychometrics, more your field, Nathan. Anything or any development as well that have been happening throughout the past 5 to 10 years that you think are probably notable, especially for the people who are fairly new in the field?
Yeah, well, as you saw at the ATP conference last month, it's definitely AI. It's not just a buzzword anymore. People are using AI far more often, and it's not just for the AI remote proctoring. They use it for test development, doing job analysis, and things like that. I saw several presentations at the ATP conference about using AI to make first drafts of test questions when you're writing items for your certification exam. And they all agreed, yes, it's an absolute time saver. You still need humans to review it, But if you cut half of your test development time off, that's a massive, massive savings, especially when you're talking about experienced people like doctors and lawyers that are involved in making these exams. So I think that's the most exciting piece.
Yep. Yeah, true. AI was definitely at the forefront of everything. And now probably, looking at it from the, okay, can do better, needs improvement. Belinda, where do you see some of the blockers, or where do you see maybe some of the components that maybe we haven't made as much progress as maybe all the other aspects that you mentioned earlier? What's on your mind?
Yeah, I think in the test development realm, I think it was Rick Lecht who talks about item development, particularly as a unique craft project, that we think of items as sort of, if you think of handcrafts, we do, it's one piece at a time. We develop one item at a time, and that's a really costly and a really time-consuming process. And we've been doing it that way for eons, for decades, for years. And things like principled item development methodologies like assessment in engineering or evidence-centered design have been talked about for a while. They're not exactly new, and yes, they are being used by large assessment organizations, but they haven't achieved widespread adoption yet. We're still kind of doing the piecemeal kind of item development that is very costly and very time consuming. So, I'm hopeful that things like AI will spur us on to more cost efficient and more timely development, but that's definitely something that has been a challenge, and that we do need to see more progress being made in more modernization of and more widespread use of some of those methodologies of how we develop tests and how we develop assessments. So definitely, I think particularly for the small testing organizations who have small volumes, it's a challenge. So that's one area that I think we definitely need to see some innovation in.
Yeah. What about you, Nathan? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the largest issues, and it's something that's been a core of my career, is trying to help smaller organizations implement psychometrics and other advancements that are available to these billion-dollar assessment companies or nonprofits that have, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue and essentially unlimited resources. They can easily develop their own AI item generation algorithms or adaptive testing algorithms or anything else that they want to do. But even though these advancements have been around for years or in some cases decades, they're still not being taken up by the small certification boards in similar types of organizations. And it's important that we figure out how to empower smaller organizations to implement some of these modern technologies, because it will improve their assessments and reduce costs.
Yep. All right, perfect. Thank you for the overview, and maybe we could move on a little bit deeper and kind of look at the life cycle of assessment, specifically maybe starting with the test development. And maybe before starting about the test development, because I know both of you have been involved in probably end-to-end projects, dozens of projects apparently around the world with various organizations. Before somebody kind of rushes in and develop their test and probably go a little bit too fast, not necessarily thinking about all the various steps, maybe a question for you, Nathan. What are some of the tips or guidelines or potentially mental frameworks that you provide some of your clients in kind of approaching the test development and potentially the whole kind of end-to-end, delivery security? what are some of the things maybe you want your clients to have in mind before going a bit too fast into getting things in motion?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question, and one that I've come across many times in the past 2 decades. Certainly one of the first things that an organization need to do is develop a business plan regarding a new certification or the whole organization as a whole. Because I've certainly talked to people who will be like, oh, I'm going to start a certification board because they think it's really easy to do. And they're like, oh, I'm going to go get accredited with NCCA because they think it's really easy to do. But they haven't even taken the time to read the NCCA guidelines and realize that they're going to have to spend a lot of money on lawyers for board documents and bylaws, spend a lot of money on accountants for certain types of reports and all these other things. I've heard a benchmark that it costs $100,000 to get accredited, and these organizations think that they're going to just start a certification board, deliver it to 50 people, and get accredited within a month.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely not the case. So doing that business plan and educating yourself ahead of time on what are your goals for the certification and what is it going to take to get there is absolutely essential.
Yep. No, that makes sense.
If I could interject something there too, and this is like something really basic, but knowing what is the purpose of your certification? What is the goal? What do you want to test? What are you hoping to achieve with the certification? Even for certification agencies who maybe have a certification and are trying to just start something new, I've seen where, it's like, great, we're going to start this new certification. And then they get everybody in a room and they realize that there are 7 people there and they have 7 different views of what they're hoping to achieve with the certification, and they spend 6 months to a year spinning their wheels trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing, and just waste a lot of time and money in doing that.
Yeah, alignment. Yep.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, and there's so much information out there that's available to these organizations now. It's not hard for them to figure out what's involved and get an idea of what's the target market for something, who are the people I should reach out to talk to about this, what are the policies that exist in my profession regarding this. All that's now easily available. Same with the accreditation processes. Like I've had multiple people come to me and they've never even looked at the accreditation documents that are published by NCCA and others. And they think that I'm personally going to be the one that accredits their certification, that I just look at it, maybe edit a few items and say, yes, the certification's accredited. No, that's not at all. Couldn't be more off of what's involved with accrediting the certification. So it's important to educate yourself because all this information is out there.
Yeah, of course. Probably going back to one of your earlier comments, Belinda, kind of talking about the process of item creation, item bank management, kind of being still one of the operational challenges for certification professionals out there, and kind of thinking that AI could potentially be that white knight, cutting 50% of the time to deliver that. But are there still potentially aspects, ways that maybe some of the organization could actually approach it a different way? Maybe some of the low-hanging fruits on how to actually, streamline a little bit the operations throughout that process, from like the creation, the management, the tagging, and all of that. What have you seen?
Yeah, well, I definitely think, like Nate mentioned earlier, there is great promise for AI being able to be used for helping with item development. I definitely see it as a tool to assist humans. It is not going to take over the item writing process. It is going to assist item writers to be more efficient. I also think that it can be used for things like assisting with, I think Nate might have mentioned this as well, potentially assist with the job task analysis or the practice analysis process with some of the upfront work and being able to use even things like natural language processing in um, using, analyzing work artifacts like uh, job descriptions and policies and procedures and standards of care to determine what is, the scope of work and some common tasks that are done. Identifying enemy items that can help so that you don't have enemy items on an exam. So definitely AI can assist with that. Um, I think that we can use even human item writers more efficiently in deciding, what tasks can be done in a virtual setting versus what tasks actually need face-to-face interaction and can be done more efficiently in a face-to-face environment. And I think that the pandemic has helped us identify some of those things, as well as, what tasks need subject matter expertise and what tasks don't need subject matter expertise. Need a good editor, but don't necessarily need subject matter expertise to do that. So being able to have and craft well-defined policies and a well-defined process so that you're using um, your subject matter experts for what actually you need subject matter expertise to do, because um these people are people whose time is valuable when you're talking about doctors or attorneys or architects or whatever. You want to use them for the jobs that you absolutely need them for. So being smart about the processes that you set up to do your items and review your items and just being smart about that, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Yep.
Yeah. And I would
And
say take that perspective and apply it to all aspects of your certification organization. Ask questions. And if the answer is we've always done it that way, that's probably the wrong answer. How we take registrations, how we determine if someone's eligibility to take the exam, how do we schedule exams, how do we send results? There's so many things that you can ask those questions about. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day. He's working with the certification board, and when they write their questions, they don't use paragraphs. They put every sentence on a line, even though centuries, thousands of years are using paragraphs to structure text. And the answer was, well, we've always done it that way. Well, no, you should probably use paragraphs, even though your company's always done single line questions.
yeah, no, of course. Probably going back to maybe one of the points that Belinda was talking about, engagement with your subject matter experts. Because I would imagine, Nathan, you probably have a lot of experience. What is you've seen, what may work, maybe what doesn't work. Would you have any kind of high-level tips for maybe some of our audience here on the best way to kind of think about SME engagement and how to do it, when to do it? Do you have like a rough kind of like guidelines around, how people should actually interact with their SMEs?
Yeah, well, that's definitely a big question. And like Belinda said, that's something you should ask yourself. First of all, is it necessary to meet in person, or is it something you can do virtually? I personally haven't been involved in an in-person Angoff study or job analysis study for at least 5 years. Those things can very easily be done virtually. Some things work better. in person, maybe an item development or review meeting. Belinda and I did one of those in person last year. That was pretty large and involved, and in those cases, it might make sense. But I think that's important to consider. How you compensate or award your SMEs is also important. You know, in a lot of cases, it's not a monetary reward, but it's then good to give them recognition on your website, or, you know, maybe they're like private practice chiropractors or something. If you give them links back to their website from the association, that's good for their business. There are ways that you can compensate these SMEs and keep them engaged that really don't cost that much and are good for everyone.
Yep.
And I will say that although sometimes it may not be that the in-person activity is absolutely necessary, sometimes I have found that the in-person activity is the reward. So you may have to provide some in-person engagement as the carrot that leads to their participation. Doesn't mean that everything has to be done in person. And so those are some of the things they're going to have to gauge as well.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, to continue on that, and I think both of you have mentioned the aspect of test validity, assessment validity. Have you found, kind of being where you are guiding clients, guiding organizations through the process, have you found ways where technology can actually help in providing, you know, validity, reliability, in kind of developing those type of assessments? Maybe question for you, Nathan.
Yeah, I 100% agree that technology is a huge asset in establishing validity of an assessment. You know, validity, for those who are new to it, is the evidence that we have that an assessment does what we want to do. Basically goes back to Belinda's big question of what is the purpose of this certification? What role is it trying to fill in our profession? And you want to have a lot of documentation around that. Oh, we did a job analysis, we surveyed people, we brought in subject matter experts that set a cut score, all of these different things. But technology is also important to that too. You know, you want to be able to deliver an exam securely with integrity, so that you can ensure that you can trust everybody's scores and that your exam content isn't being stolen. You want to be able to use technology to efficiently develop the assessments. And we're talking about item banking, the item writing, webinars, whatever it is that you're doing here. It's up to you what's you're working with, but because certification really is a business. I mean, we can't do it to lose money. You have to make sure to use technology for all of these aspects to do it as efficiently as possible to produce a good product. Like Belinda said, test development and psychometrics is actually an engineering problem. Psychometricians are engineers. We're trying to do things right with a very high quality rate and a low rate of failure that reduces the number of bad questions and reduces the number of missed scores, whatever it is that we're trying to do here, and reduces the number of exposures that lead to invalidated tests scores. There's so many things that are involved there, and technology is an absolute important aspect of that.
Belinda, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I totally agree. I think that we mentioned earlier some of the ways that technology has been used in the job task analysis process and identifying enemy items. All of those kinds of things lead to greater validity. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. Feel free to keep sending questions our way. We'll make sure to add them, and I'll make sure to ask them to the panelists, Nate and Belinda. Maybe shifting gear and moving into the delivery aspects of online assessments. What are, in your ways, maybe today in 2024, like some of the must-haves or non-negotiables that corporations, a credentialing organization should have part of their process, part of their technology stack? What can you not do without in 2024? And could be a question for you, Belinda, or you, Nathan, whoever wants to take it first.
Go ahead, Belinda.
Um, I think one of the non-negotiables is you have to decide ahead of time what your acceptance of risk is regarding loss of content or cheating. Just deciding ahead of time what your level of risk is going to be, and then having ahead of time procedures to mitigate that risk and to monitor after the fact, statistical monitoring, and what actions you're going to take, having a good disciplinary process, what legal actions you're prepared to take, and just being prepared because, even in the days of only test centers, you had to address these issues. So, it's the same sort of situation, just being prepared.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would say one of the first questions to ask is, what is the stakes of this assessment? Is it a high stakes certification? Is this a certificate? Is it a recertification exam? Is it a practice exam? Is it being used for licensure somewhere? And answering that question will drive a lot of the answers for everything else. Like, do I get accredited or do I not get accredited? If it's a high stakes certification with large volumes, you probably want to get accredited. If it's something lower on that stack, then maybe not. That will then also lead you to answers about how much you want to invest in item banking, or the item banks itself or the software, how you want to deliver your test. Is it going to be delivered online or with remote proctoring or with test centers? One important thing to remember for everyone that's out there is that there's actually different flavors of remote proctoring. And that's one of the reasons that we work with Constructor, is that they support the different flavors all in one platform. You can have AI proctoring, you can have recording of videos that are then watched by humans later, maybe with AI helping them to flag certain areas of the video. You can have live bring your own proctors, where like the certification board staff will watch the videos. And you can have live with trained proctors, where you've got a pool of actual trained professional proctors whose job it is to ensure that the tests are delivered securely. And you can see just within the field of remote proctoring, there's a wide range of security that's available. So you have to think about what are the stakes of the exam, and how much you want to invest in the proctoring there. But then the same thing goes with how much am I going to invest in software, how much am I going to invest in test development, how much do I need an automated e-commerce platform to take everybody's registrations and check their eligibilities. There's so many questions that go into this.
Mhm. And maybe to go back to I think one of your points around item bank management. What are some of the ways, tips that maybe you could provide some of the people out there when it comes to managing an item bank that can actually be, fairly big, like built over the years? Are there specific ways or approach that you can also help some of your clients and organizations out there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things that I recommend, such as making sure that you establish a rule for how you name your items. So items get item IDs. You can't just name them all item 1, item 2, item 3. You should call it like math.algebra.001, math.geometry.0017. You've got to come up with some kind of rule like that so you can easily identify the items and make sure that they're not overlapped. You should have strong item writing guide so that the item writers are trained in how to write good questions, and that this written guide is then available. If you're getting accredited, then that's important, because you can say, hey, yeah, we had this two-hour training session and everybody has a copy of this guide, and you can submit that guide. There's a lot of benefits around that. Having a psychometrician or test development expert to help you with that process is usually essential too. Storing metadata is another thing. You want to store statistics on the items to make sure that items that have poor statistics are not reused. You want to have item statuses so that items are retired and then not available for reuse. You want to probably have a workflow process, so that when a new item is written, it gets like a new status, and then it goes to a reviewer that's a subject matter expert, and then maybe it goes to a psychometrician to review it for format and psychometric aspects. You should have that sort of workflow established, especially if you're dealing with larger item banks.
Belinda.
Yeah, I would second all of that. Training your item writers, having, as Nate said, an item writing manual. There are some good resources for item writing. Halidina is a resource for multiple choice items as well as some other item writing types as well. So make sure your item writers have the manual and have been trained as well. Make sure that before you set up your item bank, you've given some thought to the status and the workflow and how you're going to set up your item bank so that it's well thought out, and you know what metadata you should be collecting, both from a statistical but as well as from a content perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And now, probably on the topic of adaptive assessment, I would imagine it's probably a topic where both of you have quite a few thoughts. Where do you think we are today in terms of adapting assessment? Whether it's to prevent cheating, whether it's to match some of the DEI, but what have you seen maybe recently over the past couple of years when it comes to adaptive assessment in your field?
Thanks. For those of you not familiar with adaptive testing, what it is test that's delivered with an AI algorithm that personalizes to each individual examinee based upon the difficulty of the test, so that if it realizes that you're smarter, it gives you harder questions, and if you're not quite as smart, it gives you easier questions. That can be used for a narrow type of content like a certification exam, but it's also really useful like in K-12 assessment, where it will realize that a student is 2 grades ahead or 2 grades behind and adapt to them very quickly. So you can see there's huge benefits in that. It also can be more secure because everybody's getting a different assessment. It'll get you a more accurate score with less time, because the smart students are not wasting their time on the easy questions and vice versa. So it greatly can reduce seat time, and that's important if you're paying for like test center or proctor seat time, like maybe you're paying $20 an hour. If you can take a 3-hour exam and drop it to a 2-hour exam for 100,000 people, that's a really big savings. So you look at some of those large exams out there, like the nursing exam, the accountant's exam, the business school admissions exam, they use adaptive testing for these reasons. But one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with is, like I mentioned earlier, is how to take this technology and make it available to smaller organizations. So like the nursing exam has used adaptive testing for nearly 20 years now. So has the exam to get into the US military. It's been used in the K-12 world for like 30 years. So this is not new technology, but it's still very underutilized when it comes to like small to medium-sized certifications. So these organizations need to realize that this is actually a possibility, and it can be very useful in certain cases, whether it's reducing seat time or being used for formative assessments, or maybe being used in recertification exams, because then it uniquely identifies everybody's student and they get items out of the pool that are not the same as everybody else. There's a lot of advantages of this, but the issue here is understanding that this type of functionality is available to an organization that might only be doing 500 exams a year.
Yeah. Belinda, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Nate said it well, and he is the expert on adaptive testing. So yes.
He is. So maybe kind of moving to the security aspects, and kind of thinking also about somebody who is maybe just starting to build their first certification program. What are some of the ways, simple ways, or maybe a bit harder, to prevent cheating and ensure exam security? What have you been telling your clients in terms of just how to approach, whether it's technology based or non-technology based? What are the simple preventive measure that everybody in the field could actually take, regardless of the size?
Well, I think from the perspective of, there's all sorts of ways that data can be leaked, right? So let's start with the basics. From the test development standpoint, you want to make sure that you have NDAs with your subject matter experts. And sometimes it's just lack of understanding on their part as well, as far as are their responsibilities regarding the test content. So making sure that they're aware that what their responsibilities are, that they shouldn't be sending test content via email, for instance, that they shouldn't be, if they're an educator, talking with their students about the exam, that they shouldn't be participating in test preparation workshops and that sort of thing. Making sure that the partners that you participate in have good participate with have good test security practices, that data is encrypted, all of those sort of things. So I think it's really starting with the fundamentals, and then doing as much as you can the things that we talked about earlier. If you're delivering in a remote proctoring environment, deciding what risk you're going to take, if your exam is high stakes, are you going to take that risk? What kind of remote proctoring, understanding that there are different kinds of remote proctoring, and what kind do you need to have, what kind of extra layers of security you're going to have, those kinds of things. Nate, what do you think?
Yeah, totally agree there. And then I would add on that you need the NDA or some other agreement like that on the candidate side too. So you need to set up the policies for your certification ahead of time, saying, here's how we're going to deliver exams, here's our security, here's what happens if we catch people cheating. Are they banned from taking the test from 6 months, or what is involved in doing a lifetime ban? There's all these kind of questions that you have to then establish. These need to be established ahead of time as part of your test security plan. And then you can publish that on your website, and that really protects you legally from all of the issues that might arise this. And then Belinda also mentioned, if you're using remote proctoring, one of the big questions is, do you need live or recorded type of remote proctoring? If it's a live exam, the big advantage is that if you see somebody cheating, you can stop the test right there. If they're taking pictures of the exam on their screen with their phone, like you'd be able to see me doing that right now on this webcam. And you'd be able to stop the exam right there. Whereas remote proctoring, you would see that they were doing that. You could invalidate that person's exam then, but it's then the horse is bolted out of the barn. It's too late to shut the door, and your items are now, you got to assume that they're out on the internet. So that's the biggest differentiation there when it comes to security and remote proctoring. For exams that are like recertification or prep or something like that, automated remote proctoring is very useful. If it's something that's an actual certification, then you probably need live remote proctoring, whether it's with trained proctors or with your own proctors like Constructor supports.
Perfect. Yep. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I'm seeing here 11:43, so we don't have much time left. So probably one last question for you as we kind of look into the future. And I know both of you talked about AI and some of their applications across a variety of things. But apart from maybe the role of AI in certification and assessment, test development, delivery, what are some of the other trends that maybe you're kind of looking at, and you probably would like to have the other people, the attendees here, to kind of also keep in mind that things that are probably going to come over the next couple of years. What are you seeing? Maybe Belinda, if you want to start with that.
Sure. I think we haven't talked about this at all, but I think alternative and innovative item types, the use of virtual reality in testing, that sort of thing. Also, another thing that we haven't talked about, recertification and lifelong learning and what that means. And I think that fits into also some of the things that we did touch on briefly with micro-credentialing, and as we need to retool and reskill throughout our lives, what that means for traditional education and traditional certification, and how that's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and I think AI is going to impact that. There was an offshoot of the company ACT here in the US, which is a big K-12 company that was called ACT Next. And they were really interested in what they called computational psychometrics, as termed by Elena von Davier, their lead researcher. And that involves melding AI in assessment with AI in learning. So as you talk about lifelong learning and growing competence in a skill profile, things like that for profession, you can meld those two things. And I think that's going to be one of the futures of the field, so that you can have like recertification exams that are delivered adaptively, but then that's also tied into like this big learning bank that you have, where you can help people get more skills or shore up on the skills where they're weak, and have that driven by AI as well.
Yep. So I see we have another question from the chat. So probably starting with you, Nathan. So question is, some licensure bodies have very long defined, maybe ancient processes to create assessment. Can tech be trusted and or secure enough to actually help out there?
Yeah, I think the modern technology is secure enough. I mean, the stuff that we've talked about here is used by large scale exams around the world, whether it's university admissions in other countries, big certification exams here. We now have private companies that are some of the largest testing companies in the world, like Amazon and Microsoft, Adobe, companies like that. They have a lot of exams these days, and they're investing heavily in using technology to do their exams. And I would say that this high stakes certification exam and how to administrate servers for Amazon, it is very similar to a traditional licensure certification exam in healthcare that's been around for 50 years. And they're using all of this great AI to help develop and manage those exams. So even some healthcare certifications have been doing the things the same way for 30 years, can learn a lot from what Amazon or other organizations are doing in this case here.
Yep. Belinda, do you want to add something?
No, I think Nate touched on it. Did
Everything.
really well. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to monitor the chat for the next 5-10 seconds, just to make sure that we don't have any questions. In case you have questions, you can add them anyway. We're going to be able to read them and address them in a subsequent emails. As I mentioned earlier, the recording is going to be sent tomorrow morning along with a survey. So please, take just 30 seconds to fill out the survey so we can actually improve and, touch on additional topics, change the format, whatever you might think is actually valuable for you. I know Belinda touched also on a couple of resources, so we'll make sure to add that into an email and into the description of the video on YouTube. But otherwise, if we don't have any more questions coming our way, I'm probably going to wrap things up and just thank you very much for attending. Thank you both our panelists, Nate and Belinda, for sharing their experience, their wisdom in the space. And thank you very much. And have a great day wherever you are.
Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you.